Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hello, everybody.
Doesn't
On
matter
the
what
moon again.
planet or body, celestial body you're on.
Well, it's the moon again. So
You know, I never took a astronomy class. So the astronomy that I know, even though I got a degree in physics. By the way, weren't you supposed to take an astronomy class in physics? I never did that.
during my undergrad, I didn't actually take astronomy. I took astrophysics at the graduate level, though. Not
Which is,
astronomy as such. I did teach something related to astronomy, but I
what's the
didn't.
difference between astronomy and astrophysics?
Well, if you want to think about astrophysics, you're actually thinking about how stars internally work, essentially. What kind of physics you need in order to explain
Okay.
something like the
And
orbit.
astronomy is more on the side of actually cataloging stuff.
Yeah,
We found this thing, it's over there, here's where it is.
yeah. So it's the legitimate science that
It's legitimate.
yeah, because it started from astrology, and it still carries
Oh.
some of the terminologies that come from there.
Really? What's one example? One word.
Well, if you look at the names of certain regions in space, the stars, the constellations, admittedly,
right.
that's not a standard thing. But when you're talking about something like that to an astronomer, they know exactly
Yeah,
what
our
it is.
planets, even the names of our planets are names of the ancient Greek gods.
Yeah, and also the symbols that get used, they also come from ancient mythology.
So this runs right into our topic a little bit. We're here to talk about why people convert to Islam, and it's really more generally why people go to any religion. But we're going to try to focus on Islam in particular in the current environment of things, especially in Europe. Maybe also in Africa too. The person that wanted to talk with us about this isn't here right now, and I'm trying to, talk in the background with her, and it hasn't happened yet. I don't know if she forgot or something, but we're going to talk about this anyway, even if she doesn't come on.
Well, we can start a discussion now, and I'm sure that if there's something specific that she had in mind as a kind of a follow-up, even if she doesn't show up.
Well, she definitely has details that we don't have. She wanted to talk about things going on in Europe. Neither of us have lived over there. We're American specimens. It's different stuff happening here in America. But of course, we watch the news a little bit. But still, we don't talk to a lot of Europeans, in those countries. So, and by the way, this links up to something else too. 2 days ago, I did a podcast with Britt Hartley. Britt Hartley is a spiritual director, she calls herself. Okay, she's an atheist. She educates people on how to do spirituality with all the tools, but without any of the dogma. No God, no religion, no faith, no mythology, none of that. And she mentioned something very interesting that I never thought of before. The words and concepts that religions have made around spirituality, we, or the secular world, secular philosophies didn't do it, or haven't had the time to do it, let's say.
Yeah, I would probably say it's an issue of time.
Which is weird to me. I don't understand that. I asked her, I want to ask you right now. So go back, I don't know. Let's pick a time in the past. Let's pick Socrates' time. We're talking 2,500 years ago. I'm pretty sure he was an atheist. I don't know. He got killed by the state for infecting the minds. The charge was he's infecting the minds of the people. Corrupting the minds of the children against God. So clearly everyone over there thought he's an atheist, and
Well, I wouldn't probably project those modern terminologies on people that far back, but let's say that he was a heretic of some sort.
Yeah. Well, okay, a couple of terms that get thrown around. Maybe that's not the right phrasing, get thrown around, but to differentiate between things: atheist, theist, and then deist. Okay, theist, the thea part is religion. So atheist is just saying, I don't believe in any religion. Deist is trying to be more
religion,
clear.
but specifically God, because theos is God.
Okay. I think I get different people saying different stuff about that. Regardless, though, we just need to pick a terminology system and stick with it, right? But the concept of deist is trying to say, I believe in God, but no religions. Am I saying that right?
Well, yeah, sort of, but maybe they believe in a creator rather than a god as such.
Which
Uh,
is kind of the same thing, because now
yeah,
we're just
not quite, because when you're
depends
talking
how
about,
you define God, though.
okay, when you're talking about a deist as someone who might believe in some kind of a creator that created the universe and then basically abdicated, stopped having any kind of connection with the universe, then that's not a god as such.
Okay, that's
That's a
how I
creator.
use the word God, by the way.
That
A creator is a God. It's the simplest form of one. Made the universe and then stopped doing anything after that. What
yeah,
you can say it in one sentence.
a god gives you the sense that this entity is being worshipped or has some kind of a connection with humans, whether it's one-sided or
I
two-sided.
mean, we
It
don't
doesn't
really know how people attach ideas to the concept of God or even the word. And we're using the word in English. We're not exactly sure what words they used in other languages, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
know Allah is in Arabic, and there's a few others, but
Well, Allah is a little bit problematic because it also precedes Islam, and it's
exactly. And I wonder, the first time the word God or Allah or something like it to refer to the creator plus more, I wonder if there was an earlier version saying God also, but only saying creator.
well,
Maybe you don't really know. We don't have the history.
what we do know is that there was a kind of a loose pantheon before Islam in the Arab culture, at least in the region where the Quran was created,
Pantheon
and
meaning multiple gods that they
yeah, and Allah was a kind of a super or higher god that
like
wasn't,
Zeus in the ancient Greek system.
to some extent, but he still wasn't a personal god. He was very much detached from the rest of the people, and so the other lower gods, like the ones mentioned in the Quran, Lat, Al-Uzza, Manat, and there's also a few others. These were
They mentioned
supposed
in the
to,
Quran. In what context?
well, you know the story of the satanic verses. Okay, so that's an interesting detour. So supposedly there is a very popular story that's present in so many different historical and hadith books, talking about an episode where Muhammad seems to have recognized some of the idols of Quraysh, making some kind of a compromise. But then after a while, he backed down and attributed the episodes to an intervention by Satan. That's why these verses, which have been excised from Surah 52, 53, An-Najm, they used to talk about those ancient gods, and then it was removed. For example, Salman Rushdie's Satanic Verses book, the one that caused a huge commotion, is actually focused on this whole story, and that story is pretty much denied right now by most Muslims. Even though, if you go back to the very beginning, right after the death of Muhammad, it seems that most people had no issue with it. It was commonplace. But yeah, so those gods were supposed to intercede between humans and Allah. So Allah was detached, and people, according to the Quran, people only go to Allah because only in situations where they are in dire need of help. But in regular everyday life, they don't. They go to those lesser gods. And so supposedly Muhammad at one point recognized these, and that, of course, is the biggest sin in Quran. That's shirk.
And the idea is Muhammad was clearly doing shirk.
If that story were true, because there are, according to this story, there are a few verses that have been removed from the Quran that recognize these. They're actually goddesses. They're supposed to be the daughters of Allah.
Okay, so back to the point. The things that are drawing people to religions, Britt brought up a few interesting facts I'd never heard of before. apparently there's been studies done where they, and I don't know what form these studies took. You know, maybe they're just looking at old information. I don't know. Backtrack research. I don't know, where they said basically the more philosophy someone learns, at least in the studies they did, they got more depressed. And I don't know how they did the studies, but it was interesting the way she said it. And I said, okay, my first thought was, all right, who were the subjects? And then right away she at some point asked me about myself. We noticed a difference between me and her. She has a Mormon background, and she said she didn't get any scientific education background. So when she became an atheist and started seeing philosophy or whatever, it was a big shock to her. When she asked me if it was a shock to me, there was no shock, because the philosophy I was learning 100% messed with all the stuff I learned in physics, chemistry, and biology. It did contradict the religious stuff I had, but I had both in my life. So I didn't have a shock to me. Philosophy didn't make me depressed. It made me happier. Holy crap, I remember when I first started getting into philosophy, this is after I became an atheist, I had a 4.5 hour long thought train, and I was like jumping off the ground, and it's like electricity all in my brain and neural system, and that actually so getting back to the point of what she was saying about what's happening to most people, she started giving examples of what people are dealing with. So one example was, you become an atheist and then you don't really have anyone to talk to about things, because whatever ideas you have, whether they're good or bad, the people you're dealing with don't have those, don't share them, don't agree with it or whatever. And in an extreme scenario, you're living in a Muslim country, everyone you know is Muslim, you become an atheist, you can't talk to anyone anymore. Yeah, I could see that being very depressing. But I went to, it's the environment, not philosophy, that caused it.
No, I would say probably philosophy itself could lead to something like that in the following sense. And let me relate my own view of this as I experienced it personally. So when thinking about philosophy as such, you're actually starting to poke at things that are supposed to be settled by religion, like anything that requires a lot of thinking. You have well-defined, very clear boundaries. If you want to trespass those boundaries, you're going to start thinking about things that might be problematic, and it's going to be problematic from the sense in the sense that it could cause you what you might consider as existential angst, or some kind of
but would you agree that that's because of how your upbringing or the philosophy you developed before you saw this new philosophy?
No, I'm talking about just thinking about topics that you would think about as settled from whatever religious point of view. If they are settled, you're not supposed to be thinking about it. So Marx famously said that religion is the opium for the people, so for the public, for the general public. So, why is that? Supposedly because it gives them a kind of a drug that sedates them from having to engage in more.
But that drug only works on one type of person. It's a poison to the other type, and that's my point. It's a big part of it is the philosophy you made as you grew up, which is heavily influenced by your environment. So that when you finally saw the new philosophy, was there a big gap that you had to jump to get there, and that it's a very painful gap?
Well, I think that the journey that the person is going to take from religion to whatever that's going to be on the other side is going to depend on how far it was in the first place. Like what you're saying, is it a big jump or not? And the process itself is obviously usually very long, because you have to dismantle a lot of things that have been built over so many years and that you feel comfortable with. And this level of comfort, which is usually associated with, why is it that religious people are in general happier than atheists? Well, it seems to be that you have that, which connects with the sense of community that we talked about before. So once you have that sense of community, once you have all these problems settled, you're basically living in a kind of I wouldn't say mindless, but you suspend a lot of the things that you would
Let's do an
engage.
example. Let's do one example, and I want to do this example spanning 3 generations of people.
Okay.
Death, knowing that we're gonna die, and the religious story is you don't fully die, you still have a soul, you continue forever. So imagine the first generation is the one that believes in religion and dies still believing it, and the religion has it gives them a security blanket around the idea of death.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now let's say the second generation, the kid of that generation, somewhere in the middle, let's say teenage years, became an atheist, but they grew up with that story about death. Okay, now it's hard for them, and I can give a real example of who this is. Britt Bartley told me this is what happened to her. Okay, and I can imagine what her parents were doing. She didn't tell me about her parents, but I kind of already know. She has kids. She raised them from the beginning without religion. They have no problem with death. They never had the dumb story to begin with, to need to change from it to the more rational view of death.
What do you mean no problem with death? I mean, eventually death is a kind of an eventuality that...
No, I mean just the part about, okay, so let me go back a little bit. What Britt was explaining about her experience is, well, I think what she was implying was it was sad to be switching from believing in a soul to, oh no, there's no more soul and we're just dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be, she said these words too, and she's repeating what other people say. I'm going to be forgotten. I don't matter after this. And it took a while for her to switch and to not be sad about that anymore. And she was explaining about her kids who grew up without religion. They were totally fine with death from day one. The first time they heard of it is normal. And by the way, I don't know what she did with her kids, in particular, but what I did with my kids, they did get religion from their mom early on, but 3 years old, I wasn't. From their 3 years old, I wasn't a Muslim anymore, and I never really talked to them about religion. But like the concept of death, we watched nature shows, and it was all animals killing animals. It's a lot of animals killing animals. I don't think they have trouble with death. And I never told them the fake stories. And oh, let me say this story now. Oh shit. My daughter was sad once, and I don't know how it came up, but she said that her mom told her that in heaven we're gonna all be together. All me and that mom. I got a visceral reaction. And I was like, what? No, if there's a heaven, and I don't believe in heaven at this moment. And I was like, if there's a heaven, I'm going to get what I want. Hell no, fuck that.
Well, you're probably going to be in hell anyway.
Yeah, well, that breaks the rules too. How are we all going to be in heaven if I'm in hell? So,
yeah.
And she was really young when that happened. I don't know how much that affects her now. So
no, I think that sense of depression that people might be getting is that sense that is related to the transition from believing in all that stuff, that you have to that you have that sense that when you die you're going to go to heaven, you're going to meet with your loved ones that might have died. Let me be honest. For me personally, this is actually never something that I believed in, even when I was a Muslim. So when my mom,
I never thought of it. I don't remember
when my mom passed away, it never crossed my mind for a second that I'm actually going to meet her again. It never crossed my mind. It's not.
And how old were you?
Well, no, that was about 15 years ago. So I was still I was an adult. So and I was an atheist at the time.
So when you were younger, it also never crossed your mind.
This is not something I worried about hell, but that.
All right, let me dig a little bit deeper into your brain. Then, did you believe in jinn?
Yeah, I did.
You did, okay. And I guess you believed in the soul.
In that kind of primitive way that they taught us about. It's just
not the idea of your soul meeting with your mom's soul in heaven.
No. It was the soul in the sense that this is the life force that exists in living things.
More of a trying to see it as in a scientific way. So why is it that your scientific mind, didn't go to the next level that everyone else does, or a lot of other people do, which is my soul is going to meet the other guy's soul and hang out in heaven. We're going to be best buddies.
I mean, it was told to me. It just never sunk in. It was hammered into us the same way that.
What about evil eye?
That was also told to us, like within the context of Quran. You would say, no, that's not real. But you look, no, this is in the Quran. So you say, okay, that must be real. At the time, all of these were given as part of the whole package.
So when I was growing up, again in the U.S. for people watching, to parents that are Muslims from Syria, I remember my mom would occasionally say the whole evil eye thing. I thought that was batshit crazy, and I didn't understand how my mom could believe that stuff. And at the time, I didn't even know about jinn. That's something I heard about later. And I didn't believe in jinn either. But it seems like, and I guess this is everybody, especially, when you haven't had when you haven't learned in a serious way what a superstition is, then you're only working on your intuition, which can be pretty good. So one person can recognize 10 things as superstition and not believe in them, and then there's 5 other superstitions they don't recognize as a superstition and they believe in them. So for my mom, evil eye got in for her. That was
that's the role of that community. If you're living with everybody around you thinking that whatever it is,
but you disagree with a lot of them.
If all of them believe that this is true, and you have those figures of authority, people that you look up to, thinking that this is actually real, then
that's probably it. I bet her peers, which were younger, maybe were a little bit smarter than the older crowd that believed in more of the superstitions.
Yeah, I can give an example. For me, my uncle, who was really my first mentor, I really, really respected him in so many different ways. He believed in all this stuff. He was a really brilliant mind, but at the same time, he had absolutely no problem with any of this stuff. And so
Are you sure all of it? Let's do a more extreme example. Okay, here's one my mom recognized as batshit crazy when she was young. Okay, and it's one that her mom didn't, or the older generation didn't see as nonsense.
Okay.
It was something like, I don't even know what the ailment was. It was something, maybe they went to the doctor to fix something. Doctor couldn't fix it, and now they're going to the supernatural route, right? They go to this woman. She writes something on a piece of paper, folds it up, and tells the mom, my mom's mom, and my mom was there, to put it somewhere in the house and hide it. And my mom's like, this is bullshit. I'm going to go look at that thing. She opened it up. She's like, this is nonsense. It's not even real writing. And she was laughing at it and like pissed too.
No, there are many people who believe that, and it's a very.
How about your uncle?
No, I don't. Well, here's the thing. You would classify this because it's not part of religion as such. It's a kind of a para-religious aspect that doesn't really come from religion. He would completely discard it. But he would say that evil eye is a real thing.
Because that one is explicitly written in the Quran.
Yeah, but this particular one, for example, you have books that developed later on, especially in the Middle Ages, where you have all these incantations and all these things that you can do in order to to bring certain jinn that would do certain things for you, like basically the legends that you would get from Solomon and things of that sort. So the King Solomon. And so you have things that developed later on. And if you're supposedly a well-educated Muslim, you're not going to take these seriously, but you're going to take the origin from which they have come more seriously. That's the case for my uncle, for example.
Well, from what I understand about the Quran, it says something like it acknowledges magic or sihr and all that stuff as a real thing, and then it says it's bad to do it.
Yes.
Which is opening it up for everything.
Yeah.
It's saying go ahead and believe it at all. I mean, it doesn't tell you how to tell which one is the nonsense. You know, I mean, if you can't, like, if you don't give if you don't provide a method for saying here's which magic makes sense and here's which one doesn't make sense, then you're leaving it open to all make sense. Here's the thing: the scientific way, it all doesn't make sense. All of it.
Magic is nonsense. In the Quran, all of that is recognized as real. It's just that you're not supposed to engage in it. That's all.
Yeah. So they're not fixing any of it. Is my point.
No. Yeah.
And they're propping up all of it too. That's the other point.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily in every person's mind.
Yeah. And if we assume, and this is not necessarily true, that Muhammad was really the one who originated the Quran, you also have so many things in the Sirah and the Hadith that show he was a really obsessive compulsive person who has a lot of superstition. Everything that he does, he would do in a kind of a way that has a kind of a ritualistic aspect to it, to expunge demons or to do certain things 3 times or 4 times. Otherwise, that's not going to work. So when you consider this to be something in a person to follow as an example, then obviously the entire population is going to capitalize on that. And if you have an OCD to begin with, that's just going to nurture it. If you don't, you're just following the stream.
So let's see if we can help people understand what we're talking about here more generally. I think what we're explaining here is if there was a blank slate scenario of a baby that could grow up without the crazy, crazy, I shouldn't attach labels to it, without a bunch of the nonsense in our current cultures or over the past 5,000 years, then there wouldn't be this bedrock of philosophy in your head that it's actually the accurate way to say it is your brain was wired by your upbringing. You were involved in the wiring too, but the environment was heavily influencing it. When you're growing up in a religious environment, it's influencing it in a way, and you wire your brain in a way that causes these spiritual voids, psychological void, moral void, epistemic void. If you weren't raised in that scenario, you wouldn't have any voids to begin with. You know what I mean? Like, so it's not to say that everyone is dealing with the same thing. And people have different ones. When people leave Islam, they have different voids. They don't have all the same, you know what I mean? We're not all having the same problems when we leave.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of them is, well, a big one that a lot of people have is a spiritual void. You know, like, what's the purpose of life? And they ask questions like, you know, why don't I kill myself? Which is interesting, you know, that kind of one, because I have a hard time imagining somebody would be like that in a place that has a lot of freedom where you could do anything. Versus, I really get it if you're in a Muslim country and, you know, every source of sensory data, you know, adhan 5 times a day, your dad yelling at you because you're not praying. That I could see being much harder. But I wonder, do people have that problem in America? I guess they do. I mean, when you're coming out of Mormonism, you have that kind of thing. That's in America.
I mean, probably we shouldn't be reducing the whole thing to specifically religion or any kind of system that first indoctrinates you with certain ideas, because eventually, whatever it is that the person's going through, it's going to boil down to a lot of factors, many of which are going to be very individual. Like you were saying, different people leaving a religion are not necessarily going to have the same void. You might see some commonalities, certain things that are going to characterize certain people that are coming from the same environment. But eventually, it's definitely going to be, to a great extent, very individual. I, for one, for example, never had this issue, like I said, about the afterlife. This is not something that was even in my mentality, even as a Muslim. It never registered. So,
Did you ever wonder, what's the point of life? What's the point of being here?
Yeah,
I wish I wasn't here.
So that
I
actually,
wish I wasn't born.
well, not quite. But what I went through at the time of having settled down after I left Islam, I didn't call myself an atheist. I didn't even call myself an agnostic. I didn't adopt any kind of label. But I really found existential philosophy very attractive, and the kind of contemplation of things that might
What's an idea within this category of existential philosophy?
So, what you just mentioned right now about should I commit suicide, something like that, is something that is pretty much dealt with in Albert Camus' book, The Myth of Sisyphus.
So do you mean considering questions like, what is the purpose of at least my life, and should I make a purpose? What is the, what is, should there be meaning? Those kind of things. So
right.
People would call that spirituality.
Well, from the concept from the perspective of existential philosophy, this idea of the absurd, the absurdity of everything that has to do with life, with aspects of existence, and so on, this starts to come up as a main theme. And if you have that religious mentality to begin with, that assumes that there is a certain goal that supersedes everything that you're doing that has to do with God, and now you don't have it all of a sudden, then everything becomes absurd. It means, am I supposed to continue? What's the purpose of this whole thing? And you very much see this kind of idea pop up in discussion with Muslims. Now that you're not a Muslim anymore, why is it that you're continuing to life? What's making you go on living every single day, waking up and doing whatever it is that you're doing like a machine, something of that sort?
Yeah, like a machine. I was gonna say something, and when you said like a machine, my brain just shut. Why do they see it as like a machine?
Because it's devoid of what you just mentioned, devoid of that spirituality that they think is, I am supposed to be dedicating my life for the worship and glorification of an entity that is much bigger, that has.
Okay, I'm going to say two things that I talked about with Britt Hartley. We discussed this. By the way, she wrote a book, No Nonsense Spirituality, and all of the ideas we discussed during the podcast is in her book. And two of the things she mentions, awe and transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
This person who says to you, like a machine, you're going through life like a machine. Do you think he's aware of scientists that experience awe about the universe?
No, and even if they do, they say so. If you go to the Quran, you would find a very famous verse that says, "Those who fear Allah are the most knowledgeable," roughly the scientist. So it's supposed to be that there is a kind of a correlation between the two. That when you contemplate nature, you get filled with that awe, which is something that you don't have to be a scientist in order to experience. You just
Oh yeah, yeah. You can think of nonsense stuff and feel awe,
but what I'm saying is that the scientist
like
is
unicorns.
then the scientist is then going to use that or experience that same feeling, but in a context that is very alien to everyday life. That is not something that people in everyday life can relate to even. But it is something that you can experience. You might be doing a really incredible piece of math, and that by itself can generate the feeling. You can be.
I would argue they're experiencing it more than the religious awe.
Well, I cannot compare feelings. This is, I mean,
Scale of 1 to 10. How happy are you?
Yeah.
Sarah says in Islam, the purpose of life is to prepare for death.
Yes.
Earth death. When I left, life became more precious.
Exactly.
Yes, and me and Britt both say the same thing, which is, I figured this out when talking to one of the people during the de-indoctrination episodes. I think it was Trappa. I figured out that, so people want cosmic justice, and what is it? When you stop wanting cosmic justice, then you start wanting earth justice. Or say it another way, if you're focused on cosmic justice, you're not focused on earth justice.
Yeah.
And it's not just justice, it's just everything, life.
Yeah. And the whole motivation that you would have in order to do anything creative in reality gets completely removed from the experience if you think that this is really not the ultimate experience that you're going to have. Once you realize that this is all there is, that's when that precious aspect of life starts to shine, and having that guide your everyday life. That's basically the purpose that many people within religion don't actually realize.
So while she was talking, while we were having that podcast, I noticed something that linked up to what she was saying that I've been saying for a while. I've been saying this for years. There's like two approaches to life. And I think, some people are doing both, but predominantly one, okay? There's people who, I want something, and then I'm going to decide my beliefs to match my wants. And I think that's insane. I think it should be figure out what the truth is and then make your wants to match the truth the way you see it. And of course, since we're fallible, we can be wrong about the truth. We should be willing to update our wants through discussion and learning.
I'm a little bit hesitant to agree about the idea of being able to decide the wants or being able to decide the beliefs. Most of these things just get soaked up from the environment, done in the.
So let's do an example. You're 7 years old in America, born to a white Christian family, and they've been lying to you about Santa Claus.
Okay.
And you still believe in Santa Claus. Maybe 7-year-old is too old now with the internet. But go back before internet, like, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. You're 7 years old, you believe in Santa, you want, keyword here, presents from Santa.
Okay.
When you find out Santa's not real, I think it's pretty quick when you stop wanting presents from Santa and start wanting your dad to go give you that damn present. Give me my damn Xbox.
It depends on how traumatic the experience is. So supposedly this is not a harmful kind of belief, and many people.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. But what do you think about that? Like, how quickly does that person switch? He switches. He doesn't stay wanting presents from Santa.
Yeah, but this is there's a very very immediate kind of verification that happens in this case, where you immediately find out that this is not the person that you thought he was. I haven't experienced it, so I don't know how fast that's going to happen. And it's something that I hear about, but I've never actually experienced it, so I can't really speak much to the whole idea of believing and then disbelieving in Santa.
Well, part of what would make it hard to change your wants is you already have that incorrect approach I mentioned, where
But-
your direction of doing things is I want something and then I change my beliefs to match it. Look how stubborn that is.
But the want itself did not change. It's just the means of attaining that want that changed it. You still want the Xbox, whether it's coming from Santa or your dad or whoever is going to be
that part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the way you can change your want is things like, okay, I'm okay that I don't have it today. I'll get it in 2 months on my birthday, for example, or I'll get it in 3 months once I've earned enough money.
Yeah, you have this idea of a kind of a pyramid of needs that need to be met. If wanting that whatever it is, that gift is not crucial, it's something that you can wait for. But if we're talking about food, for example, I want food and I want it right now. I'm starving. It means that I'm not going to be waiting or changing the want. It's something that's happening within my body.
Okay, let's continue talking about the food one. I'm 40 pounds overweight. I want that burger, or I want the second burger, let's say. Yeah, it's, I mean, I find it now, especially now, it's not too hard to say I'll forego the second burger. I'm already full on the first one, but I'm capable of eating a second one. I've seen it. I have the evidence. I've seen it many times. But part of, again, back to the point though, it's hard to change your wants when your method is a stubborn method. It's much easier to change your wants when they're already flexible and all your ideas are flexible. And I guess if you're growing up in an environment where, there's no flexibility. My family wasn't like this, even though it's Muslims. It's a liberal family in a lot of ways, not only relative to Syrian families, but also even American families. They're not authoritarian, they're not, they did punish sometimes, but their punishments were like, timeout for like an hour, but then we do it only for 5 minutes. And then we didn't get repunished just because we got out of it, So it wasn't very strict. So there's a lot of flexibility given to us to be able to be flexible. What Britt was explaining from a Mormon background, I've been learning about Mormonism recently. They're not very flexible people.
Oh, no, they're not.
Not at all. It's very much like Islam. Although because it's in America, there's legal protections. Plus a broader culture that helps. From what I heard from Britt just a couple of days ago, she said the ex-Mormon community puts pressure on the Mormon community in a lot of ways that curbs some of their nastiness. Okay. And I wonder what it's like in the heavily Islamic countries. There probably isn't that positive source trying to make it better.
I know an ex-Mormon who shared some of the experiences with me, and the kind of ostracizing community that he was describing is very similar to what you would expect from a Muslim community that no longer wants this particular person because he left his beliefs or is no longer adhering to them the way that they think. So it's not harmful in the same way that a Muslim community could be for an ex-Muslim, but it's still very, very unpleasant for people who leave the faith, at least from my limited exposure to that. And there are so many different aspects, actually, surprisingly. If you go back to the early days of Mormonism, there are so many things that are very much parallel to Islam. So it's very surprising. It was even actually recognized by the Mormons and their adversaries at the same time that that Smith was actually behaving.
So in the 1850s, I recently learned about this. I didn't get this history from school. I guess they wanted to hide a lot of the religious stuff. But in the 1850s, this is before the famous Civil War that the U.S. had. They call it another Civil War, an earlier one.
Yeah.
5 years earlier in Utah. Basically, Utah Mormons were trying to secede.
It wasn't just Utah. It was something else. It started in Missouri and went to Utah, and New York was initially involved.
And they were killing everyone who wasn't them. Everyone. Doesn't matter who it was. If you were against us, we're killing you. Very ruthless killing, at least according to the movie I saw. Although I heard about the movie that it was actually they toned it down, the reality of what they were doing.
Yeah, so there was a lot of it was a big mess.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And it's a thing where they took an older religion. It's like, oh, I noticed. This is what I think happened. Oh, I noticed we can control people with this. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. How do I make it more controlling? That's what they're doing. And they invent new ways of controlling people. It's crazy. So I guess, we're saying spiritual, psychological, moral, and epistemic voids. And I there's another one I should have put on here that's maybe bigger than all of this. Community.
Yeah, I think probably the community is the biggest one.
What Britt was explaining to me is, if you walk into a Mormon church and say you're Mormon, instant community. Everyone wants to be your friend right away. You have automatic family get-togethers and your friends are playing with each other. And she said, atheist groups tried to make communities like this, and she's tracked all of them, not all of them necessarily, but a lot of them. They all end about 5 years later. And she has one like that, and it is sort of having the same experience. And what she explained was, with a lot of these groups, some of them start around deconstructing from a religion. And then once most of the core early members did that already, they're done doing it. New members might come, but there's a disconnect between the old members and the new members, and it doesn't really work out. Which I think happened in your group, right? The Shebeke?
Well, yeah, and I think there's something that's inherent in the type of people who eventually leave religion. So typically when you talk about bringing atheists together into one group, it's like herding cats and trying to create a kind of
individualists.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the main characteristics that you get in people who leave religion. If you're able to think for yourself, then you had the ability to create a kind of a space or a distance between you and the community in the first place. Now, does that mean that you are now seeking an alternative community after you have left the original one from which you came? Probably not. Not necessarily. I mean, I'm sure that there are many people who still seek the sense of community after they.
Well, some people pick a different religion, but some of them go back to the same one, and they're like, "Look, I don't believe in Islam, but I'm just gonna go through the motions because I want the community."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. In fact, if you go to certain places in Europe, like Britain, you would look at people going to church and you would think that these are religious people. In fact, that's not the case. They're just going for the social aspect of this.
Right. And people call themselves today cultural Christians. So they're going to church and they listen to some of it. They're not they're not automatically shitting on all of it, but they kind of ignore the parts that are about God, and maybe they translate it to something else in their head. And by the way, about translations like that, whenever I see a sentence with the word God in it, there's usually two ways you can replace that word with, and it'll make sense. You can either replace the word with truth, and the sentence will make sense, and you can say that's what they meant. Or you can replace the word with universe, and the sentence will make sense. There's a third category where it doesn't make neither of those two words make any sense, and it's complete nonsense.
Well, I would add a third word, which is the word that I mentioned before that Daniel Dennett used, and that's also the word that's the origin of the word God, which is goodness.
Okay, so what's the word?
Goodness.
You said goodness in English, but what is it? Is it in like Greek or Arabic or?
No. Well, in the word God doesn't exist in for example in Greek. In Greek, you have things that are derived from Zeus, Dios.
Well, God probably came from good, right?
Yeah.
G-O-D, G-O-O-D.
Yeah, but most certainly. So there is that natural external reality that exists outside, like you said, truth and universe. But then you have that kind of interhuman reality that has to do with morality and people treating each other. So it's goodness. And so what people unfortunately really do is that they take these abstract concepts that are very obviously human and then try to cast them outside of the human community. So you're talking about something like goodness. Really? Am I talking about a kind of an external entity that did some good to me? What about the people around me? Like that's really nice article that Daniel Dennett was talking about. He went to a hospital and he was explaining how each single person was really doing something very crucial and wonderful that eventually led to his recovery. It's humans.
You just made me realize something. People say, okay, after somebody recovers in the hospital, people say, thank God. And then the criticism is, hey, you should thank the doctor.
Yeah.
If you replace God with one of those other words, okay, let's try all of them. Thank truth. That one doesn't make sense. Thank universe. That doesn't make sense. Thank goodness. They say that one.
Yes.
And that's the translation you just gave.
Yeah, but they say thank goodness for a different reason. They say thank goodness and thank gosh for this, or gosh or something like that for the same reason, because they don't
know what gosh is. Well, where did gosh come from?
Oh, it's a
they have to say God.
Yeah, well, yeah, because they don't want to utter the name God.
So it's a secular. They're in a secular group and they don't want to say God, but so they say gosh.
Well, yeah, but this is coming from the 10 Commandments. You're not supposed to utter the word God.
Oh, like that. Okay, I didn't see that one. All right.
No, it's if you listen to anyone who's religious,
So let me ask you: is this a stretch? Thank goodness can be equivalent to thank humans' knowledge, because for me to thank that doctor, 80% of it is from people before him. He's just the crown that, is taking all that 3,000, 5,000 years worth of knowledge and delivering it right now for you.
Oh, yeah, that's, well, the thing is that you have that knowledge, but you have to have someone who is dedicated enough to learn that knowledge and then to dedicate his life. Essentially.
That's definitely him too, yes.
Yeah, so it all boils down to humans, people who acquired the knowledge in the first place and people who are implementing that knowledge.
What do you think of the value of thanking the universe? Thank you, the universe, for being the way you are, which allowed this doctor to fix me.
Well, that's a little bit abstract, in the same sense that when you're talking about God as that kind of very distant entity that somehow interferes in your everyday affairs, it's the same thing, except that now you personalize that general abstract force and give it a name. I don't think that in a very concrete situation like being in a hospital and recovering, it's meaningful. It's something that you actually
This reminds me of something. because we keep talking about thank you, thank God, thank goodness. I'm reminded there's this huge theme in our culture right now, at least in the West, which I think maybe was born out of Christianity. I'm not really sure. Being thankful, like actually spending some of your mindful effort, let's say during meditation, or some people do it during prayer, to be thankful and just think about the good shit you have, as opposed to, and they're contrasting against something else, which is wallowing in your pain and only thinking about the bad shit, and that means like not being thankful of anything, and that's instead like hating your situation. And this theme of people doing this, I think it's encroached into therapy, and so it has nothing to do with religion. It's just saying it's a psychological, I don't want to say trick, tool, I should say tool, a psychological tool to get you out of the shit that you're in, of just wallowing in pain.
Yeah, it's the same kind of suggestibility that is usually needed in order for hypnosis to work, or in order for some kind of a placebo to work, or any kind of medication that requires you to create your own internal willingness to approach a situation that might have an actual physical aspect to it. But then it's possible in certain
cases. I think part of it is you're trying to train your mind. If your mind currently is trained to always look at the bad, you wake up in the morning and the first 5 things you think about is, oh no, I got to do this thing and this might bad thing could happen, and all that, and your first 15 minutes is that, you might have a really bad day for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And the idea is to retrain yourself so that in the morning, the first thing you think about is things like being thankful for what you have. I don't know. For me, I don't think I really had the troubles. I didn't really have always look at the bad. I'm more always looking at the good, and maybe in a bad way, in the sense of, because there's you can focus on the good and miss some bad thing on the horizon.
Yeah,
and that's worrisome. So I try to do both, in a healthy way without going crazy or depressed.
And that's exactly the part that causes some people leaving religion to go into that kind of depressive state, where they feel that they had some tools that are no longer there, including the community. But not only the community, it's also the psychological tools that are no longer available, and they don't know how to repurpose what they had, or how to invent new tools that are doing the same thing. And so it makes a lot of sense that if you now leave that religion or whatever system of thought, you feel that you have been dispossessed of your original tools.
And to be clear, I don't know if we made it very clear, but the mainstream, when people leave, when they leave a religion, their conception about things like spirituality, including morality too, is you can't have it without religion. So they're already looking for another religion.
Yeah. Yes.
Regarding epistemology, I'll say, okay, epistemology is the study of knowledge, and all the religions make claims about epistemology. Epistemology is trying to answer the question, how do we know what we know? And Islam does make claims about that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so does Christianity, and I'm not so sure about like Buddhism or whatever. I'm just thinking of the Abrahamic ones, the more ones I'm familiar with, the ones that claim an infallible God that you have to obey. Where was I going with this? Yeah, the epistemology. So a few days ago, or was it yesterday, I wrote a post and I used the phrase I've never used before, Islam's epistemology. And you could use it with all the religions, right? Christianity's epistemology. You could say, I guess, physics is epistemology.
An everyday experience epistemology. I mean, an epistemology is just going to come up from anybody who's trying to use and evaluate knowledge in some form, even in everyday life. It's just
We make
that
up epistemology as we go, to be clear.
Yeah.
That is the only way a baby learns how to think enough to like assign, oh, that's a tree, and when things get hot, they get red, so don't touch them. You know, all that is, they are learning epistemology. It's not very advanced yet, and it, you know, if you don't learn it directly from a source where it has been building up over the last 3,000 years, then you have I would say you have a pretty poor epistemology that hasn't been updating with everything else. So ancient Greece started something like this, and it's a direct line from ancient Greece to physicists today and all the other types of scientists, of the epistemology knowledge that grew and evolved bit by bit from then until now. And I was just saying, Islam has an epistemology. Now, where did that one come from? Well, one thing, know that it hasn't changed in 1,400 years. The claims about how we know things written in the Quran hasn't changed. Maybe some of the interpretation has changed a little bit since then.
Well, I would probably push back against that, because many of the things that we have both in Christianity and Islam, as we know them today, incorporated a great deal of Greek knowledge, plus other knowledges that or other bodies of knowledge that come from other cultures that existed before that. We're talking about ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia that were incorporated in these. So I wouldn't say that we have something that hasn't been updated in 1,400 years. On the contrary, if we actually take the raw information that was there, it's very different from what we have today. And the theology and the philosophy, like, for example, for Muslims, there is a kind of an analogous way of approaching some of the philosophy called kalam. So kalam is pretty much very it was something that was formulated in the Middle Ages, and it depended on Greek philosophy to a great deal. Same thing happened in Europe in an analogous way, but not quite the same.
Let's put Bruce on now for a moment, okay? Bruce, are you there?
Hello.
Hello. I think this was a good timing to bring you on, because what we were just talking about was epistemology and Islam's epistemology, and kind of the why people go to Islam when it comes to kind of the lack of or the shitty epistemology they have to begin with when they left Islam. You know, they still have it. They didn't change it yet. The only thing they changed was, I don't believe in God anymore. You know?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me again. I enjoyed listening to the discussion so far. For your question, first of all, you're right in saying that Islam has some kind of epistemology. Every person must have some idea about the topic of epistemology, because epistemology is the answer to the question, how do I know? So you can't live life without having some idea about
even the most rudimentary version of how do you know. If you ask a 5-year-old, how do you know Islam is true? Maybe their answer is going to be, my daddy told me. It's very clear in their mind how they got the information.
Yeah, or in school, I had some students when I was in school. I asked them, how do you know that this is the correct answer? They would say, the teacher told me. Yeah. That's some kind of epistemology.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it might not be accurate, but the point is, that's how they got the information. That's how they decided that it is true. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And now, in terms of Islam, sorry, I don't recall the question exactly.
I didn't really ask a question. I was bringing up a topic, and I hadn't formed a question yet. This maybe still vague. I wonder if it might make sense to connect this to what you and I and Osama talked about last week.
Or
Because it
maybe
was
I
in
can,
this ballpark.
if you want, I can tell you my view on something I would like to add to what you have been saying.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think that humans, biologically speaking, have certain difference from other animals, in the sense that if I told you that some humans are living on Mars, would you be surprised? Or, I mean, for today, it would be a surprise. But
I guess I would be surprised if well, I wouldn't even be surprised if monkeys lived on Mars, because humans can bring monkeys to Mars.
sure, but
Anyway,
if you
didn't we
heard
send
that,
monkeys in space?
yeah, exactly.
Chickens?
But if you heard that lions have built a colony under the ocean and
Yes, I
living
would be
there,
very surprised. Yes.
yes. So humans have the ability to adapt to different environments, and that is an advantage, but also comes with a challenge. The challenge is that you are born without a manual, without a guide to life. So you have to rely on someone discovering a principle or an idea, whether good or bad, to be able to practice that idea. And if you start over with each generation, with each kid, you start over, then there's it's very random. So what evolution might have done is that it said, okay, if the parents are still alive, they got so far as to have kids, maybe download some of their view of life, their philosophy, to the kids. And I think that many of our differences as individuals in life, and or let me say it like this, that sometimes you recognize something as true, but you have a feeling that you don't want to accept it, even though you see the answer. Even in math, even in algebra, when they invented
And sometimes
algebra.
your feeling is the correct one.
Yes, exactly. So where does this come? It can come from implicitly learning from your parents all the things that they have accepted either from their parents or discovered in their lifetime. And then at a certain age, the age of reason or whatever you want to call it, you start to reconsider that. And here comes the psychological difficulty. And also, if you add force here by the government or society or the parents themselves, then here it becomes stagnation in the environment. And you have a tribe that continues to believe whatever it believes forever. Because if you challenge it, even in a small situation in society or etc., you can't, because there is a threat of force.
So Karl Popper differentiates between the open society and the closed society. The closed society is, if you can imagine what it was like, I don't know, let's say 10,000 years ago, in a tribe that was very authoritarian, where they would punish anyone who deviates. They're trying to make everyone the same. They're trying to make the grandchildren the same as the grandparents. And in an open society, things have switched where there isn't that kind of environment, and people are free to deviate from the collective. And that's what you see, that's what the Enlightenment is. That's what we have today. And of course, it's degrees. We can have an even more open society. Yeah. So, and you have that today. There's whole places, even within families, you could say, some families are very authoritarian and some families are very liberal. And so you have a little bit of that happening on the small scale of even a single family.
Yeah, I'll give you an example from a few years ago. Two parents in India sued their only child because he did not want to get married and have kids. And they said, we spent so much money on you to get you to the university and you are successful. We want grandchildren. And this was an actual lawsuit in the government. I don't know what the result was, but I can see your face now. In the US, this would be completely ridiculous. But in India,
society example, yes.
Yeah, I would say probably in China, that's actually more or less the norm, since they have the one-child policy. You see, actually, what's happening is the parents invest most of their wealth into bringing up the children, and so they have an expectation that the child is going to try their best to get a good education and eventually to take care of them when they get old. And so you don't see a lot of people going into nursing homes and so on.
Wow. So how I think it's easy to help people that are living in the open society. It's 1,000 times harder to help people living in the closed society.
But it's the closed society that needs the help, not the open society.
No, well, they both need it, but yeah, those closed society people need it far more. Yes.
Yes, and there are some novels about. I think I forgot what was Brave New World. I think where people just leave in society entirely to start a new one, even in a freer society like the US, they want to live. And some people say now Elon Musk wants to go to Mars to start over too. So it's a problem for everyone actually. But there are degrees.
That may be why we left Africa.
Yeah, it's very possible. Actually, by the way, this is another thing, because you talked about ancient Greece a little, and the idea of God, what it played in people's lives. The first half of your conversation about the relationship between everyday life and God would be almost unintelligible to someone living in ancient Greece at the time, because for them their primary focus was this life. Even the Jews did not have an idea of an afterlife.
Yes.
This idea of God was like something like the supermarket or the mall or the concert. It's one of these things that are in this life. And it's only after Christianity and Islam that, and Judaism also later as it developed, that there became this focus on another life.
Interesting. Yeah, I heard from Ayan Hirsi Ali. She explained something in one of her early books many years ago, that the West is a philosophy of life and Islam is a philosophy of death, philosophy of the afterlife.
Yes, but she talks about the West as in Christianity to some extent, but it's actually
most recently, she's
Well, when she said this was many years ago when she was an atheist. When I remember her talking about it, she wasn't talking about Christianity. But yeah, I mean, there's a huge swath of people in the West who think that the West is, or at least America is, what do they use the words? Judeo-Christian, and they use two other words, Greco-Roman. So four things, right? The Greeks, the Romans, and the Jews and the Christians. But of course, we're more than that. You know, we're not just those four things.
Yes, and just to give you an example, this is from a Greek myth, from Homer. Homer is disputed as being one person or many authors, but regardless, in this myth or story or whatever you want to call it, Achilles, I think Achilles in English, is someone proposes to Achilles to go to the afterlife, and he says, I would rather be a slave in this life rather than a master or a king even in the afterlife. So and you know how slaves were treated back at those times. So
I wonder, unpack that for us. I'm not clear. Why was he against being a king in the afterlife?
Because for them the afterlife was like it's finished. It's like a very faint idea of being like a ghost, living like a ghost, or something like that. It's not too much different from being actually dead. So they wanted this life, even with the suffering, if there is any suffering that it entailed.
Yeah, and in Greek myths in general, when you're looking at the afterlife, it's that drab existence in Hades where you basically you're not essentially dead, you're not alive, you're just existing in that place, which is the basis of the Sheol that eventually went into Judaism. Looks like Hani is trying to get in. He sent an
Yeah, he
email.
didn't have the link, and I guess he didn't know. I sent him an email. I mean, that's how you got in.
Yeah.
But I sent it to him
Okay.
over email.
And just to finish on this point, of course, there were exceptions. For example, Plato spoke of another reality that is more real than this reality, but still, it wasn't anything like what we think of today of a relationship to another world. And but of course, this had influence on Christianity in the Middle Ages. Plato was somewhat very influential for Christians.
Even before the Middle Ages, the Hellenistic effect that came onto Judaism and then onto Christianity, the whole idea of the spirit was actually not something that's originally in Judaism, and so there was a great amount of Greek influence on this idea of having this afterlife, this separate reality, this non-corporeal existence that's going to exist separate from what we have here.
Yes, absolutely.
So, Bruce, you said you got to get off. When is it? When do you have to get off?
Me or Osama?
Well, I
Osama
need.
said that. I thought it was Bruce saying it.
No, it's me. So, yeah.
Yeah, you said at 3:30 you got to go, or in 12 minutes.
Well, yeah, 1:30 in my time.
Yeah.
So yeah, the main idea, and also to tie this to Brett, which you had a talk with about spirituality and her experience. You both touched on a point where you said that how fast you change your belief in something, and I agree with both of you partially. Osama said that it can be difficult to change your view, and you mentioned the example of Santa Claus. I think that there are two errors here that people can make in this issue, which is that to say that it's too hard, that sometimes it becomes impossible to change the views that you got from society or your circumstances or your parents, etc. Or to say that to expect people to change too fast. So my idea is that in principle, it's always possible, just that it can take too much work. And this is therapists rely on this in saying that some issues can be resolved in one session, some issues can be resolved in 10 years maybe. So,
and if it takes too much work and they're putting their effort into something else instead, like their job and taking care of their family, then maybe they never get around to solving the problem. What's up, Hanny?
Hi, I'm sorry for the confusion because you sent me an email this morning and I was clicking on that link, but it didn't, I guess it was another link. I don't know. It looked like another link. Anyway.
Yeah, I sent you an email naming the episode 320. Here it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a different link.
You went to the one that was 313. Today's 320.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
No, but I didn't send you an email this morning. This was last week.
No, you sent me, I think, yesterday or something. There was anyway.
I don't
sorry.
know. I don't remember. That's all right. We did fine. Bruce helped us out too.
Yeah. So where are we now, guys?
How are you smoking in Ramadan?
It's night now. In any way.
So you're in the clear anyway.
Yes. So I'm not doing any sin.
Well, alhamdulillah.
So Hani, by the way, this is Bruce. Bruce was on with us last week, and he joined us this week too. We've been enjoying him on our show, and apparently he's been enjoying it too. Hopefully we have Bruce. Hopefully we have you on more times in the future.
My pleasure.
One thing we can talk about. Go ahead.
Nice to meet you, Hani.
Oh, Hani looks frozen.
No problem.
Yeah. One thing we could talk about is what are we going to talk about next time? I don't have anything decided. A lot of times I do already, but I don't.
I think that if Anna were to join next time, since the topic that we have over here has been we talked about it from one perspective, but the actual aspects of talking about this from how people view it on the ground.
Yeah, we didn't really say much of that. If she comes on next time, I guess we could do that.
Yeah, that's probably a good plan. At least a kind of a continuation of the topic to make sure that.
Sorry again. I'm sorry. The internet is really bad here, so excuse my internet. Yes, so you're telling me this is Bruce. Who's Bruce?
Oh, he's just somebody that's been called in twice now, and very smart guy.
Right.
He's in my Discord now. We talked there a little bit, so he's doing a little bit better than you guys.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good.
That was a mean joke. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
So and he wants to come on and other times for other topics. But what we were going to talk about now is what is going to be next week's topic. And
yeah. So I'm sorry. Today's topic, it was about why people are converting.
And we might do the same thing next week because Anna, who's been on with us once before.
Yeah, we actually have Hani at a disadvantage right now because we talked and he disconnected, but we were thinking of continuing this topic next time because we probably talked about it from a more abstract point of view, and there's some concrete things that can be said about what's happening on the ground. And it seems that Anna told Rami that there is some stuff that can be said about it.
Yeah, and she wanted to speak specifically about what's going on in Europe and why people are attracted to Islam.
There are a lot.
He was going to talk about all sorts of things, like why people are attracted to that one dude. What's his fucking name?
Tate.
Andrew Tate. And then on the other side of it, the women, how the feminists, supposedly feminists, are seeing Islam as this good thing, you know. Oh, Hani, we have two Hanis now. Hani's back.
Yes.
What's going on, man?
Yes, I'm back. I'm trying to sort out the internet.
That's all right.
You know, I'm literally in the middle of nowhere in Africa, so the internet is really bad.
Yeah. I'm actually envious. I mean,
envious.
Yeah, the travel. I'm sure that the work is arduous, but
it's interesting. I mean, I have to say I like my job, but it's very demanding physically and emotionally. Like physically, for example, yesterday I had an accident because there is one of our projects that is quite remote, that you cannot access it with a car. You have to take donkeys. So I took the donkey, but I fell while we are on the way. I tried to walk, but it was a long walk. It's like 3 to 4 hours donkey ride. and it's very because of the mountains and the rocks, and so
You're jealous, Osama?
Yeah, actually,
we have to come back.
I like these challenging trips, but I'm sure that this is probably not the challenge that he was talking about, since there is an emotional aspect to this.
Yes, but there is the emotional aspect, because my job as a communication manager is you interview people and you hear their stories
Yeah.
every day, and 99.9%, if not 100%, is horrible stories like you hear of their.
Yeah, that where right after that you need to have talking with your therapist.
Yes. Yeah, and, it's all about their being displaced, raped, tortured, you name it. So, and then while interviewing them, you take notes, and of course, no matter how you try to detach yourself from them, you get affected by it. But it's kind of interesting, I have to say. It's interesting, but I'm almost done. Like, I have another 2.5 weeks, and then I'll go home. I finish my mission, and then wait for my next mission. I don't know where. Hopefully, it's going to be less dramatic. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a boring life compared to that. Very boring
Well,
life.
I miss, to be quite honest, right now, I miss
The boring life.
Yes, I miss it. I want to be home. I want to be with my cats, friends, go to a coffee shop, like enjoy the simple things, like going to a coffee shop and have a nice latte with a piece of cake, like that's nice.
For me, I really want to see a lot of places in the world. I've been around a tiny bit. I have Syrian influence, America. I've been to China a little bit for a couple of weeks. Got to taste that for a little bit. But that's it's very little compared to what you've done. You've talked to so many different people around the world, and not just that, but exposed to their culture and how they cook food, how they eat, how they hang out, how they socialize. That kind of stuff is fun for me, and I haven't gotten much. I haven't gotten my fill.
But it's also
I have to say, like, I'm really lucky in that regard, like, traveling to places that normally you wouldn't go to. Like, I am now in a remote area between Chad and Sudan, and but it's beautiful. I mean, the scenery is also quite, in Africa, like, the trees are enormous. Like, nature is just enormous. Everything is just, my gosh, gigantic here. So, like, when you see mango trees, they can be as as tall as maybe 5-6 story building. Like,
well, they're really old, right?
Yeah, and they are like just massive, like
in America, I don't think we have too many old trees like that anymore.
Yeah, and not only the old trees, but
down.
also the size of it, like the diameter of the tree trunk is just.
Well, I mean,
like,
that's how you get big, is old.
Yeah.
Some trees are 1,000 years old.
There are trees in California that can go really big and really old. I really have to leave. I apologize. So
okay, man, this is probably a good time that we end, unless you guys have anything else you guys want to talk about.
I don't know.
So what was, like, I'm sorry, just before you go, guys. So what was, like, like, the bottom line on why?
Oh, we solved all the world's problems. You should have came on the show.
You missed it.
Like, any particular reasons for that?
No, no. I mean, a lot of what I did was talk about the discussion I had on my podcast 2 days ago with Britt Hartley. She's an atheist who educates people on spirituality without God, religion, mythology, faith, none of that stuff. I think that was important, and it was sort of by luck that happened right before this. I did not coordinate them.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe God was involved in that. That's how they talk, right?
Or another entity than God.
Another entity. Or how about just coincidence? I don't know why people shit on coincidence so much.
Well, like coincidence can be. I don't know. Like
it's not really coincidence too. Like let me say it this way. All of you guys will be able to appreciate this. When a scientific theory is developed, or even an invention, a lot of times there's a second group or even a third group that was right off their heels, also about to come up with it, right? So it's like two separate groups of people developing the same knowledge, and you might ask, was that a coincidence or whatever? No, it's more than that. They had the same bedrock of knowledge that allowed them to get there.
It's the zeitgeist, the spirit.
The zeitgeist.
Yeah, and so if you look, for example, at the development of the theory of evolution, it was Darwin and Wallace, and there's a third Scottish guy, I forgot his name. They almost simultaneously came up with.
And were they talking to each other, or they weren't?
No.
How could they, right? They would have to send letters by boat.
Yeah.
And one of those dudes was on an island, right?
Well,
the Galapagos.
Well, yeah, he spent some time there, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I really have to leave.
All right, let's go ahead and end it here, and we'll see you guys next week.
Okay, and I'm really sorry for this because like I was trying to log in and it didn't work. I thought it was another link, but anyway, yes. So let's have it next week then.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
All right, guys.
Goodbye. Thank you, Rami.
Bye.